Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant. It is a compilation of one of the ongoing plotlines of my fan fictions that are used to explore and demonstrate the setting of Warhammer 40k, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. I do use musical themes, so often you will find the same tracks in each entry on one of these videos. But do bear in mind that these are musical prompts, for often the stories can be weeks apart in their continuation. So I feel the music kind of eases someone back into the storyline and the mood. Many an entry is the result of a vote, as I will leave many a tale on a cliffhanger, and then get the gentle listeners to forge the narrative by voting in the comments, so they can control the direction and events of the story. So, if you enjoy any of these stories, then do watch the weekly entries on the guides and prepare to exert your own influence and vote on the storylines. Now, I very much hope you enjoy the following compilation. The golden sands stretched as far as the eye could see, undulating dunes rippling across the eye in a hypnotic pattern that could calm even the most troubled soul. The tranquility was sublime. Despite there being no hint of a breeze, the world around the Inquisitor moved. The heat haze languidly rose from the desert, making the scene seem to sway, like a sultry dancer, filling the beholder with the slow but rising embers of the promise of seduction and passion. Behind him stood a vast edifice, a thing which exuded antiquity, artifice, and almost unfathomable appreciation of the craft and passion of creation. It was old, older than anything the band of interlopers had ever been near before. It felt older than the sun which this planet revolved. Its carvings mostly lost to the caress of wind and sand which it carried, the only thing of visitation it must have had in millions of years before even humanity was able to do more than grunt its love of the light. The sweeping lines were graceful despite all of this time. The grand doors now so swept as to be almost glass, yet the odd hint of the majesty and artistry of the decoration of its heyday were present to those with the eyes and wit to see. It must have been awe-inspiring in its day. The natural beauty of the scene was utterly lost on Inquisitor Barabbas Villiers. His impatience was not lost on his retinue, who shuffled ever further from him as his quiet glare continued. The object of his attention seemed to visibly shrivel under his gaze, but still he said nothing, just slowly shook his head back and forth again and again, his eyes wide and imploring. Finally, it seemed, Villiers had asked too much of this desperate soul that had been with him for so long. Villiers had never been refused since he took the oaths and passed the tests, and now carried the badge and authority of an Inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos. A change of stance and tack was required. Villiers' stern countenance dropped, and his eyes now warmed. He carefully crouched onto his haunches so that he was at eye level with his aide, and deployed his most avuncular smile. His hand reached out and stroked the poor bald head of his very special friend. His next words were soothing and supportive, designed to elicit exactly the response he required from this, the most gifted of his entourage. Now, Furians, when have I ever let you down? When have I ever asked you to do something you cannot do? When have I not protected you, cared for you? You simply do not know your own strength, your own ability. I ask so little. I ask so rarely. You can do this. I am here. The Emperor is with us, with you. None can harm you. All I want you to do is to look for me, see for me, and tell me what you see. Like a dog wishing to please his master, Furian's eyes lit up for a moment at the warmth he was receiving from his master. But a shadow quickly fell behind his eyes, and his smile turned to a frown of fear, and his head dropped, his gaze at the ground instead of into his lord's eyes. I am scared. I know I should not be, as the Emperor is with me. You are with me and protect me. But I am scared to look. I can feel the presence. It is old, my master. It is so old. I do not want to look. Can there not be another way? You are the most wise and powerful man I have ever met. Can the Lord Inquisitor not find another way? No, Fodians, I cannot. I know this is an old place, but we have been to so many. Why this one? Cooed the Inquisitor imploringly to his sanctioned psyche. Fodians gulped and then responded, but he did not raise his head, did not make eye contact. It is not this building I speak of, not these ruins. It is the one who came here, the one who opened them, the one you hunt. I did not know. Now I do. He is old, my lord. His scent is so strong. He is older than the stars. I dare not look. Inquisitor Villiers stifled a grunt of displeasure and kept his face a mask of tranquil felicitation. Fodians, we have come so far, been so far. I have shown you the stars as you asked. I have shown you kindness. I have shown you my trust. Now I ask this one thing of you. If you do this for me, I will allow you to rest on the ship for our next 3 stops. I will not ask you to come with us until you are rested. But I must know, Fodians. You must see for me. My whole life has led to this place, and this time, it cannot end now because you are scared. If you will not look, if you will not tell me what you see, you spit on my life's work and everything we have done. You spit on me. This last phrase gained an immediate violent reaction. The thin and spidery figure looked up in a flash, with the beginnings of tears in its shock-wide eyes. Fodians bit his bottom lip so hard it bled, his body shivering like a struck and abused cur. But he slowly nodded. The fear in his eyes drowned by the moisture as he met the gaze of his master. His lids closed tight for a second, and he drew in a long breath and then stood. His quivering hand slowly stretched towards the towering portal before him. He hesitated at the last, his hand shaking almost uncontrollably. But then it stopped, and he slammed, his open palm and fingers stretched as wide as they could across the sand-blasted stone. A corona of white energy seeped out and formed tendrils that ran to each edge and then returned to him, forming a circuit. Fodian's head snapped back and his mouth stretched open in a voiceless scream, his eyes ablaze with light bursting out of them as he opened his mind to the memory of the mound, the recent history of this artifact among the sands, and he saw its glory and terror. A voice now erupted from Fodians that forced all but the Inquisitor to take multiple steps back. This had never happened before. Barabbas Villiers stood his ground and watched, listening intently to every last syllable of every last word. He had waited decades for the merest clue, the merest hint that he was on the right path, that he was right and not deluded, as his brethren in the Ordo had chided or laughed whenever he was amongst them. Finally, vindication was his. He would miss nothing. Fodians intoned. He comes. He comes. He comes here to this place to rouse his sleeping people. He is the Silent One, the first of his kind, the last of his kind. I see him. None in his entourage know who he is, but I can see it. I can see the endless ages around him, the skeins of time he has traversed to be at this time in this place. He is beyond us. So far, far beyond our language to describe. We do not have the frame of reference. He is so old. He is power, not the like of the witch or the warrior. He is regal, he is the power of old. The power that merely directs on his wish is carried out. We are so small. What he has suffered. Empress, pity what he has suffered. Their children. They screamed for weeks and months before they were used to the never-ending pain. They all screamed. They were blighted. All of them were blighted. For their son was the slow feast of a malevolent god. The darkest and most terrible of all of the gods. It was death itself, the Grim Reaper. It ate their son and cursed their flesh. They were all in such pain, never ending, never subsiding, never to be relieved from cradle to grave. Never before has a race been so cursed, so like us. Yet their anger is justified. If it were 10 times the unquenchable river it is now, it would be justified. They have been cursed, cheated, stripped of their souls, used and abused. But he changed this. He, the only one who could. He plotted and hid his mind, his intentions even from them. He bided his time. He waited for millennia, longer, throughout their war with the mind gods, throughout the battle between the malevolent powers of his masters when they ate each other and snuffed out sun and twisted holes in space to wink sways of the galaxy out. He waited. Then he struck. He defeated them all but 2. He hunted them down and turned the tables. His people burned in their millions, their trillions. His 2 brothers were slain, but he endured. He was implacable. He won. He won. This is the being who won the war in heaven. What he has done. He has seen the turning of the wheel, yet he does not drown in the weight of the eons he carries. He wears them like a cloak. It is his sign, his majesty. He is their king. He has witnessed the birth of wonders. He has witnessed their death. He has seen the end of his race and the beginning of his rule of the stars. He has seen the end of gods and ordered the death of demons of power beyond anything we can know or face today. He is a god killer. He is a lord of power. He is their king. He comes to rouse them all across the stars, across the myriad stars of this galaxy. He has been everywhere, every when. He moves through time and space like a shark through the seas. He has a name. I know his name. He is Cesarek. He is the greatest and last silent king. Fodian's head shook rapidly, and his every muscle now twitched, as a seizure of such force overtook him that he seemed on the verge of turning inside out. His hand was stuck to the doors. His eyes, still ablaze with power, began to sizzle and filled the air with an acrid fog. As the Psyker's eyes burned out and his body shook, the Inquisitor nodded once slowly, an incline, like a tiny bow, as he witnessed his Psyker burn out. It had happened before, but never had the bounty from the gamble been so high. He now had a name. He was right. As Inquisitor Barabbas Villiers turned to walk away, leaving behind him the now charring and smoking, yet still standing carcass of Fodians, he slowly and smugly smiled to himself. He was right. A flash of light drew him out of his self-congratulatory reverie as he saw the heat distortions around him phase into reality. His remaining band were now surrounded by metallic shapes. Green energy arced through the air and lit each of his remaining companions up. He saw them erased from reality, like a green fire burning figures made of paper. Only wisps of smoke floated skyward on the heat vapors where once his entourage stood. Barabbas did not reach for his sidearm. He knew he was dead. But the skeletal metallic beings did not fire. They advanced. His was not to be a swift death, it would seem. Barabbas Villiers awoke on a cold and hard surface that smelt of sterilizer, yet still had the dried blood of its last guest splattered across its edges. As the Inquisitor's eyes adjusted to the burning bright light from above, he took in his surroundings. He was in a room of maybe 20 meters square, and saw countless instruments and utensils on the walls. He was raised off the ground on what could only be described as an operating table, its cold metal stiffening his muscles round his naked back. His arms were extended to either side, and although he could see no physical restraints, he was utterly unable to move them. Villiers saw one figure in the room move toward him smoothly and slowly. There was a regal air to his movement and his stance as he finally stood above the table. No white coat or drills as Villiers had expected. Instead, there was just a metallic gold sheen reflecting light from every single angle on the being of metal. His eyes shone with a lampant green glow as his unmoving features opened and a sound escaped what the Inquisitor could only believe to be its mouth. It spoke in perfect High Gothic, but the sound was like the voice of ages, a rumble that seemed to be coming from not only a bottomless cavern, but from the ends of the universe, or from a different time long ago. It sounded old, but most of all, it sounded powerful. More certain and assured than any voice Villiers had ever heard in all the decades of his life. "No, control your anguish, little mortal, for we are not here to extinguish your life, your fire. We were intrigued by you. Of all the beings in this galaxy, only you have had the skill to track us. Only you have uncovered our secret." Barabbas Villiers' mind was confused for a moment. We? Us? Then realization dawned on him. This being was using the third person. It was him. He was in the presence of him. The one he had tracked for nigh on 7 decades of his life, but never been sure, never believed that it could be possible that he had stumbled onto the path, the trail of this individual, this legend. Yes, even our own subjects are less skilled than you are. We have read your journals and logs. We are almost flattered, or would be, if we were not who we are. Your awe is justified, it said with all of the confidence that Villiers had recognized immediately. Barabbas, the man, knew his own awe had indeed been justified. If only 1/10 of what was said about this person was true, this was an honor that could only be compared with a personal visitation of his own holy emperor. We will make good use of you. You will be used to take our terms to the lords of your people, one day. For the now, we are not ready, and nor are your lords, for they do not, even now, understand the depths of their need of our assistance and protection. One day, you will take our offer and our terms to them. It will not be the same world to which you will awake, but then, is it ever? As the words sunk into the mind of Barabbas Villiers, a field of energy enveloped him, and his breathing ended. His pulse stopped, his every movement halted, as he was placed in a stasis field. They're coming. Despite them being over the horizon, I can feel it. They cut off our astropathic quad days before ever appearing in orbit. They fell on the northern hemisphere, and it took less than a day for them to overrun it. All contact was broken, so I knew that they were gone. I stand on these plains, these dust-strewn meters between us and them, waiting. I stand in a line with thousands of my fellow PDF, Planetary Defense Force. We will not stop them. But in the Emperor's name, maybe we will go down fighting. I can hear them now, as the ground shakes, and their hideous Xenos chittering fills the air so much that we can make it out even from this distance. We were never trained for this. Defense of the planet, of course. Corsairs, raiders. But not this. Tyranids. I think that is what someone called them. No, I've seen them picked, but thought they were just scare tactics. Propaganda from the governor to keep us all in line. "'Tis you told, the Xenos will get us." Never did I actually think they existed. How could the Emperor permit such as these to exist, to threaten his people? If they are here, where are his angels of death? Thoughts that could get me shot, get me burnt. But what does it matter now? We are all dead. As they crest the horizon, I see a tsunami of claws and teeth and pincers charging towards us. What is worse? The air begins to darken as their hordes approach. I look up and see them. Thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of wasp-like but leathery winged things in the air. Some of them are huge if I can see them from this distance, but with tiny flies all around them. Again, they must be the size of a man if I can see them from this distance. Nothing of ours flies out to meet them. It seems all of our air wing must have been sent to the northern hemisphere. We are screwed. The very ground begins to shake with their advent. I can see the very sands and dust in front of me shake and bounce. But it is not them. It is something else. Something beneath us. I'm covered with a shadow, and a strange whining sound above me makes me look up. My eyes widen. My jaw slackens as I gaze in awe at yet another horror. Were the bugs, the Tyranids, not enough? Huge Xenos pyramids with glowing green lights descend out of the sky, a line of them that must number in the hundreds. It covers our lines entirely. Panic ensues. How do the bugs have spaceships made of a shifting metal? How? Thought they were bugs. Oh, a shock to the core. But nobody is moving. Despite some moaning and whispering prayers to the master of mankind, the Emperor, we are rooted to the spot. It's over. But they do not land on us. They are moving in front of us. Just far enough for them to not squash us. And the ground now erupts into mountains of things that are slightly different, like fatter pyramids, break through the surface all around us, before us. They were beneath us all this time. They were underground. The bugs are still charging. I do not know what to do. Nobody does. We just stand there agog, paralysed. And then it begins in earnest. The flying Tyranids launch themselves forward like a dark and hungry thunderhead, but these pyramids just move towards them and begin their work. Flashing lights of green seem to whip from the pyramids, scything entire swathes of the Nids like dark tech fly swatters. Nothing is passing them. Nothing is falling from the skies, though. These green beams and crackles of energy are just evaporating, disintegrating everything they touch. Some of the Tyranids are drawn into weird light distortions in front of the pyramids, like whirlpools of energy. They simply disappear inside these vortices. The fatter ones, the ones near the ground that burst from under us, they move forward directly into the hordes and start to annihilate everything. I can see huge Tyranids being crushed like overripe grapes just by being underneath these fat pyramids. It's like they are crushing them with energy or something. We hear a strange sound resound across our lines, repeated from each of the pyramids near us. It's hard to decipher, but I make it out finally. They say, "Remove yourself from my battlefield, or I will remove you." It is the Xenos. Somehow they are speaking Low Gothic. It is not going all the way of the new Xenos, as waves of Nids seem to be making ramps out of their own bodies and diving onto the pyramids, taking them down, one here, one there. They are literally eating through the strange shifting metal like it was paper. But it gets worse and worse, more and more confusing, as out of nowhere some of the pyramids above us descend and shine lights on the ground. Out of these lights start walking thousands upon thousands of metal men, like skeletons. The message is repeated again, and as one, we now run. We run fast. I do not look back. I do not want to know who is winning. I know only just one thing. The old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is a human saying and may not be respected by whoever wins. I said I would not look back, as I ran from the horror of Xenos fighting each other, the bugs, the Tyranids in their unnumbered teeming hordes, against floating pyramids and legions of lurching metal warriors. But I couldn't help myself. I simply couldn't. As the last of the PDF made it over the hill, charging headlong away from the carnage unfolding below us, I stopped. I turned around and was transfixed. The flying pyramids just swept forward, seeming to summon thousands of metal men. They flew into the midst of the bugs, their green weapons firing continuously, evaporating anything they touched. It didn't go all their way at first. Blaster bugs moved forward and spat their acidic balls at the metal Xenos, eating through them, tearing them out of the skies into the waiting clutches of the swarms below. The bugs eat metal, did you know? Even from this distance I was amazed at how they ate and tore through the downed pyramids. But as time went on, larger Xenos flyers fired towards the ground and yet more metal men appeared. Onwards they marched slowly, methodically, churning through the nids like a meat grinder. But everything was simply destroyed. They literally wiped the bugs out. That was a month ago. A long month ago. The metal ones, who told us they are called Necrons, they quickly made good capital of their victory. The pyramids flew over our hives, their men marched its streets. They had won. After what they had done to the bugs, none resisted them. Well, one or two brave fools. But the Necrons had smaller flying machines, tomb blades someone called them. Like sky bikes, they allowed them to pass over us, herd us. When necessary, at the first sign of rebellion or resistance, they struck and killed us. Those green beams, flying down, just removing people from reality. Within 7 days, there was a new normal. Our leaders had bent the knee, yet they spoke mechanically, as if possessed by some foul spirit. They spoke of the mercy of the Necrons, of their greatness. But it wasn't necessary for many to be controlled this way. Fear. It did the rest. Fear of the tomb blades, the monoliths. Fear of the Necrons. Strangely, life wasn't that different for many. Too little rest or sleep, or food or water. Too much work, too many hours. But it was the result of our labour that was different. Where once we made weapons and items for humanity, for the Imperium, now we slaved all day to create edifices and palaces for our new overlords. Many died, but many always did. It was on a cloudless day that all hell broke loose yet again. And first we all rejoiced. What could be worse than the Necrons? They struck so quickly. It all happened at once. We see the world claimed by the Muling Monkey, built on the ruins of darkness. The fools would make a nest in an abattoir. They are so dense, so witless. Thus we have arrived to continue a war eons in the making. Our war with the Necrons will never be over, until the last of them is a smouldering pool of detritus. Never. Our war with the lesser races is not as long, yet is as brutal. All of them stand in the way of the return of our race ascendant, of the only true rulers of this galaxy. The Eldar Empire. The fools. They will learn, but it will avail them naught, for the knowing will only come as they are undone, as they are crushed beneath our boot. For we are Beotan. We know how to fight the ancient ones, the old enemy, the Necrons. We unleashed a sword wind. Our shining spears take control of the skies by hunting down their tomb blades. Our crimson hunters sweep away their proper air support before it rises into the skies. Way serpents dart out of the blue and rush across the desert sands to skip over the walls and disgorge tight clusters of our aspect warriors across the slum that was their human city. Falcons and fire prisms tear the monoliths and obelisks out of the air before they can properly power up. All of this is just preamble. I lead a tight formation of shining spears across the battlefield, flying fast and low, but gaining enough perspective to see their outcomes. Our units of aspect warriors hail shuriken fire into the Necrons. The tiny discs fly at the densely packed blocks of the metallic enemy, slicing through spines and weapon links, embedding in bodies and hard edges of sidearms. But those that hit the correct marks are pulling the Necrons to pieces, all while warlocks are moving forward to bring lightning down on the remains, to make certain they do not constantly reanimate and stand to continue the fray. We know how to fight the old enemy. We are built on. But after only an hour, the vast majority of those remaining Necrons simply start to fade away, like some mirage brought into the star truth of day. They are gone. A shame. We could have finished them if the battle had continued. Now they will muster elsewhere. Our actual reason to be here is thwarted. The Monkey. Since the end of the hostilities, and slowly at first, then in their masses, they fill the streets, moving in their ungainly way, braying with their ugly voices. They seem to be celebrating. Witless. I allowed them their head for an hour, for more of them to congregate on the street, while they hail us as their saviours. We muster. I give the word. And those aspect warriors, those wind riders, they show me again what our weaponry can do to flesh. Shuriken slam into the mass of humans and arms of severed heads taken straight off. Blood coats the streets in seconds. I can see one of my warriors kill 3 Monkey with one shot. I shall commend him later. I am Lethilian, an autarch of my people. Yet I hear that in Imperium the Monkey call me the Butcher of Bieltan. I would not want to disappoint. As the wailing intensifies, I do not even have to steel myself. I do what comes naturally. The winds blow across the plains, making the long grasses dance and sway in undulating waves, like a sea of green beckoning to me. I answer. I walk amongst them, the seas of grass, my hands low and outstretched at my sides. I feel their gentle caress across the palms of my hands. It is the love of the world spirit that I feel through these appendages, its fingers touching mine. We are one. So it has been since our people left the harsh and heady havoc of the days of the Empire. For it was dying, it was decaying, it was falling. But it was not seen by all. The degeneration that would destroy our ancient civilization in one outcry, one raucous bellicose scream of exultation and victory. The birth scream of the being that now hunts our futures, hunts our very souls. She who thirsts, Slanesh. Thus my forebears left that rotting empire and struck out on our own. For they saw the rot setting in, and foresaw its end. We went to the fringes of the galaxy, to worlds that had been terraformed eons ago for this very purpose. But instead of continuing the cycle of pain, of corruption, we put aside our technology. We put away our toys and temptations, and returned to the life that was always meant to be. A simple life, a pure life, a good life. The Exodites are what our scant remaining king call us. Eldari, but not of the craft worlds. We have been on this world, this magnificent place of beauty and serenity, for a score of thousands of years or more. We have grown. We have raised our families, and raised our farms and simple hunter-gatherer lives and patterns. We ride great saurians at time of need. At those times we take out what little technology we have retained for that most unpleasant of activities, war. But scant as this happened. I was told once that a race that looks somewhat like us, the Mon-K, the craft world has called them, for they have better knowledge of these ungainly parodies of our magnificence. They came, but we repulsed them with ease. But that was some generations ago now. My musings blow through my mind like the wind does my hair. I find myself at the highest point of the valley, looking down on our simple yet elegant abodes, place I call home. As I begin to walk down toward it, the holy shrine, the one vestige of our heritage, the great webway gate that stands amidst the buildings, it begins to shine, its runes lighting up in sequence. I have never witnessed this, not in all of my 1,000 years of living. I have been told what it is, what it does, but it was so unimportant to me, having no experience of it, that I must admit I forgot much of what the elder said, forgot the nuances. So as it begins to shine, its glyphs come to full awakening. I stand agog. Many in the village now move from their homes to witness this greatest of oddities, this rarest of all events, for someone is coming. It can be no one but one of our cousins of the craft world elder, so they stand in relaxed bemusement, awaiting the surprise of a visitor from the great expanse of the darkness, of the void, the coldness of space. But it is not so. Something is wrong. The gate does not so much open like a sea, but bursts into life, its centre not a clear pool of water, but a rent in space of lambent malevolence. Something is direly wrong. I begin to run toward the village. I need to get my weapons, I know this. I can feel the howl of anguish and pain that emanates from the world spirit as the first "Sing" is blurted out from the rent in space, quickly followed by more, and in that moment, I see my world end. It is the soulless, the slaves of the Ingir, the horror of the past. How? They were but tales. It was all meant to be a metaphor, I thought. But nay, they are here, the soulless. As great rays of energy spring from the extended arms of these metal monsters, these terrors from the dawn of time, I see my people die. Whatever is struck by these lines of hate simply dissolves, seems to evaporate, seems to fall apart, eaten away by the power of hate that springs from them. I am so shocked, so horrified, I stop. I stand and watch where I should be moving forward, gaining my arms and standing, or turning tail and running to inform the other settlements. They are here. How? A word floats to the fore of my mind. Dolmen Gates. And with it come the stories I thought forgot, of implacable lines of metal men walking slowly and relentlessly through our people, forever repairing themselves when brought low by our weapons. The unstoppable, the ones who were supposed to be defeated, they have returned. It can only be them. But the tales, our religion, our parables, they are wrong. They are so very wrong. For what comes out the gate moves so swiftly, killing all, not in the way I was informed, slowly and deliberately and uncaringly. No, they are wrong. The soulless metal beings below me are flying amongst the village and around it, making sure none can escape. Others are rampaging, for there is no other word I have at my command. They kill and crush and tear at my family, my people, my village. Swords as large as a man, claws that dig into bodies and raise them up before pulling their victims apart and spraying the blood to the winds. It is so brutal, so hateful. They are destroyers like none I have ever seen or heard. Some are on 3 legs that make them move like a spider, but twisted by nightmare. They are moving into the houses, the buildings, killing all inside, hunting all. This is not just killing. This is not just ending foes. This is extermination. Nothing is spared and nobody. Their movements, economical yet vicious. I fall forward onto my knees. the tears flooding from my eyes as I experience grief as only an Eldar can. I see one of them appear out of nowhere. It has many arms, and it stares at me. Its blinking green eye, all I can see. And then it shoots. The battle rages across the entire planet. It has done for weeks now. They came out of nowhere. Some say they came from beneath us, were somehow on this planet for perhaps millions of years before we even colonized, from how deep they seem to be dug in, if you believe the scuttlebutt. But there isn't often much time for that now. Some say they came from the stars, their fleet sweeping aside all of our navy and planetary defences. But it doesn't really matter how or why they are here. They are here, and they are refusing to leave again. The best forces we have are fighting in key positions, for logistics, for supply, for movement or morale. The places we cannot lose. The places we have to retake. Sisters of Battle fight them through the central built-up areas, providing the main spine to the defence. The Marines, the Emperor's own Angels of Death. They are the ones who have the job of trying to push them hard, recapturing key points, hitting what seems to be the Xenos' own strategically important locales. We are told that they are winning, that we are winning. But it doesn't feel like it, from their numbers and state when we see them. Always bleeding, always reacting at a dash, always firefighting. So it lands on the rest of us to deal with the rest of the war. The Emperor protects, but he seems to have his attention on those heroes in power armour a heck of a lot more than the rest of us. For we, the common soldiery, are taking a pasting. The shufflers are bad enough with all of their firepower, their weapons melting people as we look on. Regularly they get up time and time again. But we have gotten used to this. We now focus down on one until it is dead, and then move on to the next. Well, we do if there are any of us left by that point. But there are worse things. Much worse. As the battles fracture across every major hive and factotum, it has become a game of cat and mouse. We are being broken into teams and sent out to hunt them down and end them. Brass obviously have no idea what is going on, or they would not be doing this, because they don't know what we are up against. They have no idea. Because out of the limelight, there are things that stalk, things that do not come out into the light. They move in packs, their stench heralding their approach. That and the scrape of metal or rockcrete as they scuttle around the periphery of our vision. Always there, hunting the hunters. The sweep teams that come back are always the ones that made no contact. Always. So I'm doing my very best to stay as quiet as possible. Not so that we do not alert our enemy so we can get the drop on them, but, like all my squad, in the vain hope that they will not notice us at all, not take up the scent. But we are out of luck. My nose tells me this first, the waft of decay and old blood, rancid. It catches on the air and we all immediately take up defensive positions, quietly. But it's too late. We can hear them, scuttling above us, scraping below, a pipe bumped into here, a marble floor of a reception room screeches under their metallic rush there. They surround us. We cannot get out. And for a handful of minutes, it becomes utterly silent. My anticipation gets the better of me. As I lean around a corner, I have to wipe the sweat from my eyes before I poke my head around to see. My grip on my lasgun is too tight. I know it is. But my hands are sweaty, slightly shaking. As a small felinoid rushes past my vision, I jump, and my lasgun goes off. Its unmistakable report echoes around the factotum as I now feel every eye in the squad on me for a second, then back out, looking into the dark. If we make it out alive, I am not sure I am going to be arriving back at camp with the rest. Not now. And I understand. I would do the same. But it isn't going to be that way. As we hear the screeching again, the smell returns much stronger. They're coming. Philbin dips his head over cover right in front of me, and to my shock, he is hit. But this is a distraction. As I watch him melt, his every cell being eroded by the spectral green ray of death, they hit us from the other side. Metal monstrosities, but different. They move fast, maniacal screams issuing from Vox units in their skulls. The razor-sharp claws are distended, elongated, things more like swords than knives or claws. They charge round our cover, and in moments it is over. I get up and run. The others are in pieces, so many pieces, all over the area. I look back to see some of the monsters stop and begin to flay the skin off my friends. Some are draping the skin across their arms, their shoulders, their heads. It explains the stench. I run. I keep running, expecting them to catch me. But they did not. They let me leave. Why? Did they gain enough skin for their purposes from my friends, my squad? Or was it that I had dropped my lasgun before I took off? That they would not attack someone unarmed? I doubt that. I run. I keep running. Finally, my lungs burning, my arms, my legs. I have to stop. I am at a ledge, and I look down on the facility. The horrors that are going on. I have lost my lasgun. I have discarded my weapon in the face of the enemy. I cannot return to camp now, and I cannot go on. I raise my hands out wide, looking at the factotum from at least 70 stories up. I close my eyes and push myself forward. I am flying. They cannot harm me now. Hovering atop his catacomb command barge over the wreckage, the mighty Pharaon looked out on endless fields of broken and twisted metal. All the banners and accoutrements of a once mighty dynasty lay littering the field. Carnage wrought by the great devourer, the Tyranids. The battle had been hard fought, he had no doubt, but the matter was now over, or so most would think. The planet had been stripped bare of every last shred of biological substance, every last animal, bird, fish, leaf, blade of grass, even microscopic bacteria. It was now a world devoid of even the potential for life. When the hive fleets passed over a world, they picked it cleaner than a swarm of locusts' rotting carcass. But where the locusts would feast only on the flesh, the Tyranid also consumed the very bones. They left nothing. At least, this is what the teeming hordes of the lesser races believed. The Necrons now knew better. For in the wake of the Tyranids was left much that was of value to the undying armies of the Dynasties. Precious metals and ores remained, but more than this. For the Necrons' very bodies would be left where they fell, be it ripped asunder by huge talons, crushed under the foot of gargantuan bio-titans, or simply overwhelmed and pulled apart by the swarms of their lesser organisms. But the carcasses, despite being beyond their own ability to reconstitute themselves, were not entirely useless. Far from it. The Pharaon regally observed the activity across the entire valley. The ghost arcs filling the skies and descending down to meticulously scour every last inch for their bounty. As hundreds of arcs went about their business, he could see them collecting piece after piece, nothing whatsoever being left behind. A mundane task that the Pharaon knew was necessary, but felt was utterly beneath him. But he no longer felt the sting to his prestige so keenly, not like he would when he was a living being, a Necrontier lord. The chevrons on his displays were all overlain with the one sigil that he had always known, even above that of his own family, his own dynasty, that of their lord returned. In the tiniest remaining fraction of his mind that was not entirely metal and hate and revenge, He could almost recall images, fleeting memories. Visions of the Triarchs who had assailed him in his very throne room. They had simply arrived and rushed into his palace, their metal forms immune to the vast majority of his men's existing weaponry, his honor guard cut down with contempt by these undying horrors. They seemed soulless. He could see no spark in any of their lampened green eyes, no restraint, no resistance to their masters. This was an anathema to him and all of his living people. The Necron tier who resisted the dreaded death of the Catan that their lord and master, their kings, were enforcing on every last one of their people. He vaguely remembered, like through a fog, his shouting, his hatred, his pain at the taking of his family, his guards, his entire court. How they had assailed him, these warriors of the Triarch. How they had swept aside his blade and simply grabbed him, and with all of his people, they had been marched to the machines. Those great furnaces that transmogrified, transformed them. The vehicles of the change. The factories that had ended the Necrontier as a race and replaced them with the soulless and mainly automata of their Necrons. The Pharaon knew that he was not who he once was. He had no passion, no verve. He did not laugh, as he was known to do. His belly roars, his sign that he was their Pharaon. He was the only one of them who could endure the pain, the constant suffering of their existence, and yet laugh. He was their lord, and he was their light, and he was always their better. It was his goal, to be the only man of his people who had the sheer willpower, the discipline, to not only endure the endless suffering, but to scoff at it, to riz it, to be ribald when all else were melancholy and simpering. He knew deep down that he had lost so much in the pact that garnered them all immortality. But now he was unable to truly remember why he resisted. It had been so long ago. He also worked under the constant state of semi-concentration, a clawing at the back of his mind, his now cybernetic cortex. He knew something was wrong. He knew he should even hate their overlord, their king. But his rage was now all he had left, the one facsimile of true emotion that remained, and it was not directed at their king. The sigil did not engender utter mindless obedience, but it was pointless to resist, and nor would he. For the dangers that were in this galaxy, from both its residents and these new interlopers, they were simply too much for the Necrons to do anything but bend the knee. If they did not unite, then they would be swept away, something he would never allow. And hence he had been ordered to traverse the webway, travelling along a current ripped open by a dolmen gate and into the wake of the Tyranid advance. He was to efficiently and swiftly gain the resources required for a protracted engagement, a war of attrition, if need be. For the Ghost Arks were collecting every last piece of the Necrons who had been so thoroughly trounced by the bugs. But then they would be merged, healed, repaired and reconstituted. The legions that once stood tall in this valley, hundreds of thousands of warriors were to be returned to the fight. Surely, not many would be whole recoveries. Many would be patchwork chimeras of many a warrior, but they would be Necron. They would fight as directed. And it was needed now more than ever. Oricon himself had been consulted, along with the others in the entourage, the court of the king. The confrontation that was about to occur on this one seemingly insignificant lush green world would be a crux point. A fire that would bring many moths. A smelting pot of destruction that would be one of the most important confrontations the galaxy had seen since the Old Ones still stalked the galaxy, before they had been crushed by the Necrons, millions of years ago. And the Necrons would need be the victors in part, if not in total, for their manifest destiny to be realized. The children of the Old Ones and the scum that had dragged themselves from oceans since the Necrons began their sleep so many millions of years. They arrived in their droves, in their legions. and they had not one clue what resided beneath the surface of the planet they were about to run amok on. They simply had no clue what was about to be released if the Necrons failed. The Pharaons spent the next weeks plying the entire system, collecting, ever collecting, until finally it was time to rejoin the muster. When his ships finally made their way to that one spot, he witnessed something he had not seen in millions of years, a rare thing even then, for in his scopes were hundreds of capital ships, more arriving with every second as he approached. The lesser races were about to find out how the war in heaven had been waged. They were about to face the fully awakened, fully equipped, fully organized, and expertly directed forces of the Necrons. For this was no mere fleet collecting in the shadows between the systems. This was an armada. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed the story so far, and will join us on the weekly entries as a result, and will like and subscribe. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.